Next on my screen is Jerry Koch-Gonzalez. I'd say a good friend now. I've been on many of Jerry's programs and have found the way that Sociocracy for All introduces these issues and the wrinkles, the tips and techniques have been really helpful for us in SCCAN and in Transition Edinburgh, in cohousing Scotland, cohousing in Southern Scotland, and other settings. So I'm hoping that this afternoon will be a positive and useful session. It's a great pleasure to welcome Jerry again for the second and last of this very short 2-3 hour sessions on introducing sociocracy. Nobody better. Over to you.
I'm glad to be back with you all. I'm going to do a slide deck. So I'm going to be talking through a bunch of different points, and then we're going to stop several times to do some exercises. We in Sociocracy for All, have been teaching sociocracy for a number of years now, and we've been fairly involved with climate crisis work. Ted and I were both part of New York City Extinction Rebellion for a couple of years before we kind of pulled back to try to do everything else. And we are developing a kind of a 4-session video-led course that will be oriented towards Extinction Rebellion and other climate crisis groups. That one will be made available for free so that you can all use it and bring in your new people, etc. That's going to be ready in maybe a couple of months. And it's going to be in multiple languages. So we're excited about sort of having a broad reach into the world of Extinction Rebellion. Has their self-organizing systems, but the language will hopefully apply to the variations of how people operate sociocracy. So you can look forward to another resource from Sociocracy for All coming into the future. I'm saying this because David was asking earlier, and it'd be really nice to have yet another resource. Yes, one other one will come. All right, roughly speaking, this is what I intend to do. Going to go through some dealing with consent process and objections, take a break, do a bit more about objections, and then go on to do a couple of different pieces of distinguishing policy from operations, and then do another practice around co-creating proposals. So you're going to have a practice around dealing with objections, around consent decision-making, and around co-creating proposals. That's my intent for the day. So meetings and consent decision-making. So why are we talking? We want to understand, and we want to explore, we want to decide. Each of these is a kind of a building block on top of the other. We want to understand, we want to have a shared understanding about the proposal or about the topic, whatever it is that we're trying to deal with. We need to have that shared understanding before we then try to explore, what are our reactions to this topic? What are our reactions to this proposal? We need to understand it first before we can start exploring, shared reality before we start going off in all the different directions. And once we generate ideas, then we can pick, one or, have had our reactions, then we can make our decision. So this is important to us in Sociocracy for All, is just noticing that there are these building blocks: understand, explore, decide, and they apply over and over again in multiple ways. So we have what's typically on your agenda. You might have a report. Somebody did some research and is coming back and giving a report to your group. What do you want to do? You want to make sure that everyone understands the report. And your options are, you can say, are there any questions? And maybe there are questions and maybe there aren't. And you can also, another option is, let's do a round on questions. We emphasize rounds a lot in sociocracy because rounds is what gives equivalence to everyone. Everyone has a chance to speak, have their opinion heard, have their, whatever it is they want to say be included in the group. That's what's so different than voting where you don't really get to speak, or some people will speak, or even the consensus process, which doesn't always include everyone. Some people won't wind up speaking because they don't get called upon, because they don't raise their hands. So, but in rounds, everyone's voice matters. It's the foundation of equivalence. Having said that, you don't always have to do rounds, because if something's really clear, I don't know, are we going to have lasagna for dinner? Are there any questions? Hearing no questions, let's move on. So you don't always have to do rounds as long as you are supporting the intent of everyone's voice being heard. Explorations. You've heard a report, and now you want to not just ask questions to understand it, but now you want to bounce off of that report and have a discussion. What does this mean? What might be the implications for us? And again, your options are just, are there any reactions? Because sometimes it's just very simple. Okay, no reactions, nothing, we can just move on. Or you can do the round of reactions. And I keep saying these two things because of the rounds, again, supporting equivalence, but the simple asking, are there any reactions? Meaning you don't have to do rounds on absolutely everything at all times, as long as you honor the intent of hearing everyone's voice. Sometimes people complain about sociocracy because it's so slow. Well, it only is slow if you're really learning it and you're just taking your time to learn, or if you're doing it so much by the book that you're not noticing the natural aspects of, we don't need to have a round on, we don't need to have a reaction round on meeting at 7:30. You just say, are there any reactions, any concerns about meeting at 7:30 as a regular time? None? Okay, move on. And decision-making, asking for objections or consent. So options here is, you can do the round. And anytime an issue is significantly serious, I like to doing rounds, even if I could just ask for the thumbs up. If it's serious, sometimes I just want to hear everyone's voice commit to it. Here's our 3-year strategy. I don't want to just do a thumbs up. I want to hear everyone say, I consent, or I have no objections. So we're really solidify the sense of commitment to something, fairly significant. And you can do hand signs, and we often do the hands up, the thumbs up for consent, thumbs down for objection. And sometimes you'll see people doing the thumbs sideways, meaning, maybe I have some concerns, or I'm not so sure, or I want to say something. Anytime I see a sideways hand sign, I assume it's an objection until it's clarified. So I will finish around, hear from everybody, and then go back to anybody who had a thumbs down or a thumb sideways, and I'll say, tell me more, so that we can understand what they're trying to say, and we can clarify that thumb sideways, whether it's just a concern they wanted to voice, having voiced it, they're okay, or exploring it some more, it might turn out to be an objection. So communication is always kind of an issue, a challenge as human beings. So maybe you've said this to somebody, let's go see a movie on Saturday. And maybe the reply is, what about our dinner plans? So what just happened here? Just think about it for a moment. What is that response? What about our dinner plans? Is that a clarifying question? Are we going to are you suggesting we go to the movies instead of dinner? Is that what you're saying? Is it a reaction? Like, what about, should we do both? What do we want to do? Da, 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 da. Explore what's coming up around seeing the movie and perhaps the dinner, etc. Or what? But we have dinner plans. I don't want to go to a movie. So when we have that kind of question, what about our dinner plans? We're going to need to sort of sort through that and understand, what is this? A clarifying question, a reaction, or objection. And that's human communication. So we just need to keep always getting to that point where we have that sort of shared understanding, shared reality. Okay, so we keep a sort of a standard agenda document for every circle, so every unit of our organization, and it will typically list the aim of the circle, domain, some of the key objectives, linkages that we have to other circles, who our members are, the index of the meetings, the backlog. The backlog is the listing of things that we haven't gotten around to yet that we want to save for future meetings. And then we have what's the backlog item, who is kind of in charge, responsible for that item, and when are we thinking it's going to come up in our meetings. So this is the backlog is an important piece, because anytime you're in a meeting and somebody starts talking about a spin-off topic, the facilitator can say, that's an important topic. Why don't we put it on our backlog so that we know we will get back to it, and then get back to the topic that we're talking about right now. That way you get to acknowledge what somebody is spinning off on without spinning the whole group out of your current agenda. And here is kind of the sample or the agenda. Here's the agenda for this next coming up meeting. So we've got the meeting time, and we always do the opening round. How are you on arriving at this meeting? We make sure we do the admin part of our meeting, which is attendance, duration. Do we have anything to pay attention to from last minute's meetings? Are there any announcements, information? And making sure we are clear when our next meeting is. Remember to record for someone who's going to be missing the meeting. And then comes the consent to the agenda, which is an important part of any meeting, where we transfer the kind of the authority of the meeting from whoever planned the agenda to the whole group. So if the leader or the coordinator or the facilitator, somebody may have put the agenda together. Now the whole group gets to look at what is on the agenda and says, yes, this is what we want to talk about. No, this item needs to be up earlier than the other in case we run out of time. This other item is important, can we trade? So making sure that the whole group is owning the entire agenda, and it's not just somebody's agenda. We usually have a whole reporting section of all our sub-circles, reporting on what's going on with them. And then we come down to the actual, all the way down here, what are we actually going to be talking about at this meeting? So in this meeting, we have a little bit of check on different progress of different projects that we have, performance review tracking, other things. And then our big item is going to be our budget for this meeting. And after we talk about the budget, we intend to talk about issues of language justice. How do we deal with being a multilingual organization and making things accessible in different languages? We check in on the backlog to see what we might need to add or change. If we have more time, we'll go through the backlog and make some revisions on it. Closing round, how are we ending this meeting? How are we feeling about our productivity, about our relationships with each other, the process that we took on? So that's kind of the standard agenda frame. Here's what we call our Google Drive logbook, where we have all the folders of the different circles of our organization. And we have, I don't know, 40 or so circles. So the one you just saw just now was the general circle. And if we click on that, you can see then folders within that group. We have a folder for our minutes. We were talking about language equity a moment ago. There's a folder where that helping circle has been putting some information, and so on. It's just a logbook is the place where you are keeping all your information in relationship to your circle and then to your organization as a whole. Every member of the organization has full access to everything. That we have a separate drive for things that might be what do you call it? Where we need confidentiality. So we have a separate drive where we have, if we need to have people's identification numbers, or, to a something that, some personnel issue that had some sensitive stuff, that would be in a separate place. Well, we're doing it now, right? This is part of what this training is about. Hopefully, in the rest of what we'll be doing, you'll get some of those pieces. Somebody's just saying, hey, join a SCAN circle, because SCAN does something, I presume something similar already. So the basic elements would be there in whatever meetings SCAN has. Yeah, and if you can also, we sometimes let people come to our meeting. Our meetings in SOFA are not closed per se. So we sometimes have observers. Usually they're people within our own training programs, but that's a possibility if you wanted to just be a fly on the wall and see us do our work at some point. Consent and objections. So when somebody puts forth, when there's a proposal for the circle, our reaction to that proposal may be that we love it, or check, it's okay, or the gears are out of joint, objection. Don't, this doesn't work. So an objection is basically saying this does not work. It's like like a flat tire is objecting to the aim of the automobile moving forward. Whereas the it's okay, the check mark, or I love it, they are both parts of consent. They can both be elements in consent. Something doesn't have to be perfect for us to consent to it. It just needs to be good enough. This works. It's not going to gum up the works. It's not going to damage our capacity to achieve our purpose. So this is a distinction that's significant for me, in that there's lots of proposals that I think are not perfect, or I might even think I have a better idea than this particular proposal, but it may not be worth it to try to object to come up with something that much better. Let's just move forward and try something. So this difference between a preference, this is okay. A preference, this is what I love, and this is okay, can work, is important for us to keep in mind as we look at things, so that we achieve our aim of moving forward, trying things, rather than get stuck looking for perfection, looking to have, the heart for everyone loves the proposal. We're not seeking that. Good enough for now, safe enough to try, being those kind of mantras that we often say in sociocracy. So why would people object? People object because they are saying yes to the aim. For anybody who knows nonviolent communication, this is kind of a paraphrase on why would anybody ever say no to a request that you would have? Because they're saying yes to some other request they have of themselves. We all want to contribute. We all want to move things forward. So if someone's saying no, it's because they have some reason, and we want to look at that reason. So if somebody objects, the basis is essentially some harm may come to our ability to do our aim. I don't know if I can work with this, and it becomes something to explore. The consent process has basically 3 steps. There is the understand. Let's see. To understand the proposal, to react to the proposal. This is the exploration, right? We understand and react. And to decide, to understand, react, and consent. So there's, again, just that notion of those building blocks, and we don't want to rush them too quick, because we want to make sure that we've got the solid foundation with every step that we take. Doesn't, again, mean that those steps need to take a long time. We just need to be clear. Here's another way of looking at the consent process is, we have on our agenda, the proposer or the facilitator says, here's the proposal. And I'll now do, clarifying questions round. So I can do person by person, any questions, or I can just say, can you just give a signal if you've got any questions, as I mentioned earlier. So wanting to make sure we have shared understanding. Usually, well, if the questions are simple, you can answer them one by one. If the questions are complex or perhaps raising some controversy, then complete the round before you answer the questions. And why? Because it's very easy to get trailed off. Somebody asks a complicated question or one that has kind of implications, and you respond to them, and then they respond to you, and then you respond to them, and you're no longer doing a round. You're off on a rabbit hole with someone's particular concern. So make sure you want to do the clarifying questions pretty simply, pretty quickly. Collect them if there's a number of them that need to be answered more at length and more carefully, so that you understand everybody's questions before you start answering them, rather than just go off on one person's thing. Okay, you've clarified the proposal. Everybody has good shared understanding. So now we're not going to, trail off on misunderstandings. Now we can do the round of reactions. What do you like, don't like so much about this proposal? This is kind of like a temperature check. How is this proposal landing on people? Is this going to be a simple consent, or is this going to be more complicated? Where's it going to go? Is there a direction to people's reactions? Maybe, there's a 5-point proposal and everybody's cool on 4 of them, but the 0.5 people keep mentioning something. So that's giving us a signal about that. And then the final piece is the consent round. So you say, I consent, or you say, I don't have any objections. Or you say, I have an objection. And again, all you want to do is hear what the objection is. You don't want to get into it until you hear from everybody in your group. Then you've collected the objections. Maybe there's 1, maybe there's 4. And then you can do the exploration of the objections. I'm going to ask 4 of you to leave your cameras on so that we can do this little as a fishbowl exercise. The aim of our group is learning and experiencing basic ideas of sociocracy. So in support of that, given that this is a Zoom session, the proposal is that to ensure a sense of connection in this session, everyone needs to keep their cameras on. So when do we make amendments to proposals? The first round when we have a proposal is the clarifying questions round. So that's where we're trying to understand the proposal, and there might be something that comes up there, some wording that wasn't clear. We said we would meet twice a month, and then the question is, do you mean actually twice a month, or do you mean bi-weekly, every 2 weeks? Okay, that's just a clarifying question. We can make that amendment in the proposal, that what we meant here was every 2 weeks. So that sometimes is 3 times a month because of how the 2 weeks land. So there might be a small amendment that gets made in just understanding the wording of the proposal. Then as we explore the proposal, do the reaction round, how does this proposal land on you? There might be some simple changes also, again, that might be made. The proposal that everyone use Slack, it's like, okay, a simple amendment that that we make sure everyone's trained up before we implement it. Maybe we make that kind of a change right then and there to the proposal. And then, of course, at the decide point, you can have the objections. No, we don't want to agree to Slack because that will not include the whole bunch of people who don't do technical things. And so we want to use multiple channels of communication. So that could be the objection that comes up there. So there are different locations that you can make the amendments. The challenge, one of the challenges is people getting stuck in the exploration round of doing multiple rounds of exploration. Usually we go for one round of reaction round and then consent round. And in the consent round, we'll either clearly say we consent, or we'll show up where we need to have more discussion. What are the points where there are objections, and let's then focus on those. The danger can be that when you're doing a reaction round, then you then go a second reaction round and then a third reaction round, and you're lost because you just talk, and you don't know exactly where you really need to talk, where are the objection points. So I generally don't do more than like 2 reaction rounds, often just 1, because it might be 1 reaction round. Okay, there's a lot of churn here. Let's do a second round of like, where would you go with this? What changes might you make? Start looking towards solutions, not just reactions. Objections are precious. They're what help us make better policies, better decisions. As a circle, that's what we are trying to make policy. We're trying to turn operational things into policies that make our work easier, because we have policies that we just know what to do. We follow the policy. We've done our best thinking to come up with that policy. And when we have a proposal, then we want to take a look, at this proposal. What is our aim of our circle? Is this proposal going to serve our aim? Can we improve it as best we can so that we can turn it into a policy that we can accept, good enough for now, and we can improve, later. And improving later, that's part of one of the key elements of sociocracy. The 3 key elements being decision-making by consent, organizational structure by linked circles, continuous evolution through feedback. So we can always improve things over time. There's a cycle of you make a decision, you carry it out, you see how it works, you improve it over time, aiming to make better and better decisions as you go along. And this is the lead, do, measure cycle, where you lead, meaning you come up with a proposal, you do, you carry out that proposal, you measure, you figure out how effective was this proposal at meeting the needs that we were seeking to meet. Okay, it wasn't perfect. So with that measure, we revise the proposal and do the next round. And with that, we do it, we just keep doing that. We keep improving how we work over time. How to object. So I object because. Sometimes people say, I just don't like it. Or I have a different idea. Or this doesn't work because. When people say, I just don't like it, it does not give us anything to work with. How can we amend the proposal if that's all they say? This is why sometimes in sociocracy, we call objections reasoned objections. There needs to be a reasoning, because we can work with the reasoning. We can take it apart, we can understand it, we can use it to come up with some new ideas. But just don't like it doesn't give us anything. There's nothing to do. I have a different idea creates a counter proposal. Now it's A versus B, and we can get simply lost in a debate. So rather than countering ideas, counter proposals, we prefer sequential proposals. If you have a different idea, terrific. Let's put it on the backlog. Let's work through this idea now, and then we can immediately work on that other idea and make this idea even better, but not get caught in this versus that. So this does not, I object. This does not work for me because, and what you want to do with your objection is to give information that's related to the proposal on the table. So I want to look at coming up with objections. how do we name objections that are useful so that, not the objections that are, I just don't like it and I have a different idea. I want you to do some work on identifying this proposal doesn't work for me because. So identifying your objections in a useful form. So here is another group exercise. Actually, this will be a fishbowl. Shall this be a fishbowl? Let me remind myself of what I'm doing next. Yeah, let's do a fishbowl with here. So this is not going to be a breakout yet. We'll have one group. And here's the aim of the group is connecting residents in our neighborhood in an inclusive and mutually supporting environment. So the proposal is that we will host regular, healthy neighborhood gatherings for families in North Amherst. North Amherst being the name of the town or the neighborhood. And specifically, these gatherings will be parties that will be held monthly on Wednesday evenings starting September 15th, 6 to 9 p.m. Everyone will bring food. Okay, how do we integrate objections? So, first of all, just a reminder that everyone wants to further and protect the aim, right? We want to have these wonderful neighborhoods that are inclusive of everyone. So the source of the proposal, whoever wrote it or whoever team came up with it, wants to further and protect the aim of this group. The person who's raising an objection also has that same aim, wants to protect the inclusiveness. So the objector is not simply, oh my God, Ian objected, there we go again, we can't make a decision. You're like, no, Ian objected because he wants this to be a really successful gathering in its aim of being inclusive. And so we want to look at the time of the meeting or the food we bring, etc. So, so welcome the objections because they improve the proposals. I hope that with this particular proposal that's obvious, like, oh, this proposal can be improved, right? So the objections are gifts, and that both the proposal and the objections are the responsibility of the whole circle. It is not simply the responsibility of the individual who brought the objection. The objection is the gift. It now belongs to the group. Now the group is going to deal with what they're going to, what sense or what meaning, what solutions they're going to do with that particular objection. And what do you do with objections? Well, you want to make sure you understand the objection and explore it and decide. So to understand the objection, you might just do, first of all, just some reflective listening. Again, like we've done before, like I've done and I've watched other people do in the small groups, is like, let me make sure I understand your objection. Reflect it back and say, this is what I think I heard you say, is that right? Great, so we have a shared understanding of the objection and we can move on to the exploration. So we could do a round and hear what might we do with this objection. Do we like, what is our reaction to the objection? Does it seem like a reasonable objection or not so? Or the person who was the originator of the proposal might make some changes. The facilitator might come up with an idea, or the facilitator might gather and integrate the ideas that are coming up as we hear the round. And then you get to the decision, the new proposal that you can then decide upon as amended. And what are the options that you have when you have objections? What can you change? So you can modify the proposal, change something about the proposal itself. You can shorten the term. Instead of just doing, this is a 3-year proposal, let's try this out for 1 month. Let's try this out for 3 months and see how it works and gather feedback. And you can measure the concern. What warning signal will you pay attention to? What will be telling you that this proposal is effective or not effective? So that if you have this thing that you're going to pay attention to, you know, how many times did dogs bite people? Okay, it happened 10 times. That's a, you know, we counted that, and that means we might want to change our dog policy, for example. So you have different ways of amending proposals: modifying itself, shortening the term, accepting the proposal as is, but putting some attention to how you would evaluate how effective it is. All of which is to support you in moving forward. Maybe a little different, maybe evaluating earlier, maybe paying attention to things, but moving forward. How do we respond to kind of the false objections? The, I just don't like it, I have a different idea. So if somebody says, I just don't like it, then we can validate. It's like, I hear that's not what you want. Help us to see if there's an issue with the proposal, you know, in relationship to the aim that we have. So please tell us more. So you say, okay, I hear you, tell us more. Or somebody says, I have a different idea. Okay, great, you have a different idea. Can you write that down? Put it in the backlog so we don't forget it. We'll make sure we get to it. And for this proposal, you haven't told us yet what you think is not workable about it. So can you address that? So validate and redirect. So you don't tell people you're out of line, we're doing a round, we try not to say to people you're doing anything wrong. Always say yes and. Yes and, yes and. So then now we get to the exercise where we have where we look at this. And I want to list this proposal about the parties, the regular healthy gatherings in the town, and Wednesday evenings, 6 to 9, everyone will bring food. You heard a number of different objections. And what I'd like you to do in small groups is to take one of those objections and see how you could rewrite that, modifying the proposal, shortening the time, measuring the concern. How could you integrate that objection into an amended proposal? What did we come up with? So providing food for the first event, so it's not a barrier. Basic foods that we would provide with an invitation to bring potluck to share, but you didn't have to bring potluck to share. And bring vegan food that would be accessible to everyone. So wanting to have some basic foods that anybody could eat, invitation to bring and just provide food for the first event. So those are some of the dealings with the inclusively bringing or not bringing food. Okay, let me then go on to something else. A little bit on policy and operations. Policies. You know, one general rule that we sometimes have is everything's allowed until it's not. When you have controversy, when you have debates, oh, that's a clear signal that you need a policy. But until then, you don't need to make rules for absolutely everything. You don't want to become a rule-bound organization. You make policies as needed to support the work of the organization. I was once part of a consulting group that made a tremendous amount of policies about how would we share the money that we made. And meanwhile, we weren't making any money. So we spent a lot of time making policies about what we would do if we had money, instead of doing operational work of getting out there and marketing and connecting with people. So organization has an aim, and then each unit of your organization will have a will subdivide that organization's aims into different circles having parts of that aim. So if you have 4 main departments, the entire organization's aim would be kind of separated out into those 4 departments, distribution of authority and responsibility. And each of those circles would have to make policies in its own area. So you make a policy, and perhaps you define some roles. Roles being a kind of policy. You're going to be the social media person, and here's the definition of what the social media role would entail. Or it might be divided into, you're doing TikTok, you're doing Instagram, you're doing YouTube. If you have a social media group with multiple, since there's multiple avenues for social media, you might define roles that are specific to each media approach and name people to serve those particular roles. And not just roles, there's policies, there's roles that are a kind of policy. Another kind of policy might be workflow. This is the, how do we bring in new people into an organization? Okay, there's going to be kind of 9 steps. What are those 9 steps? First, you have the person can see on their website what you're about and click on something, which will then lead them to a meeting with someone to orient, to ask questions, which will lead them to the next thing where they become a member and they get informed of rights and responsibilities as a member, and so on. So there might be a whole workflow that's defined for how one becomes a member and gets oriented and joins a working group of the organization. Some circles might not have much policies, but just might have a lot of roles. Some circles might just have a lot of workflows. Like, for example, if you're a call center, you have a lot of workflows, but you don't, everybody's got the same role. You answer the phones and you've got a workflow policy that you're following. And some circles may have just a lot of policy work to do. In my community, the membership circle is all about policy. But the buildings and grounds circle is almost all about operations and workflows, because they're basically just fixing things. Whereas membership circle is trying to figure out what's the policies around associate members and full members and rental people, just a variety of different levels of membership. So kinds of policies. So there are policies like what we were just working on, what's our food policy for this event? What shall we have? What should we not have? Then there are the roles that I was just describing. What's going to be, how do we describe, and in Sociocracy For All, we actually have templates to fill in. It's like, what's the aim of the role? What are the responsibilities and authorities of that role? What are the qualifications for that role? Are we saying something about how many hours of work they're expecting to do on a weekly basis? What policies will this role be guided by? So there's a whole set of kind of integration of policies that are in a particular role. And then the workflow. And the workflow starts building into something we don't have time to discuss, but is all about the continuous evolution through feedback. Is you meet your client. There's kind of the input, transformation, output on the horizontal axis, and lead, do, measure on the vertical axis. So there's, for every stage of the work, you're doing some measure. You meet a client, you write an offer to them, like we did for SCCAN, in a sense. Was the offer accepted? Okay, it was accepted. Okay, let's review the agreements. I get to do the work of preparing the presentation I'm going to do. Is my presentation complete? Okay, now I'm getting ready to deliver. I deliver the presentation to you, and is the delivery complete? So there are many workflows you can design. All right. There's one last item here with the time that we have left. Let's see how far we get. We've talked about how to deal with proposals. We have a proposal. You do the clarifying questions round, reaction round, and consent round. And what do you do with objections? What happens if you don't have a proposal at all? How do you go from scratch? How do you go from nothing? So here is one that I want you to practice. We'll have again a small group doing this. So you are sharing a car with a group of 6 families. This is a new arrangement. You haven't really done this before. And so someone is worried about the trash that might be left behind in the cars. So you want to generate a proposal for how will you go about keeping the car clean. So when we're talking about generating a proposal, we're going to first, what are all the dimensions? What are all the questions that need to be considered? I often just give the example of dog policy. If you are, let's say you're living in a housing development and you don't have a dog policy, what considerations would you need to think about in determining a dog policy? What are the issues that come up around dogs in a housing place? David.
So the things that irritate people about dogs are dog poo and dog barking, the basic ones.
Yeah. Yeah.
So then.
Yeah. So those are the questions. What do we do about? Those are the dimensions. If we were talking about dog policy, the dimensions, what needs to be addressed might be barking, biting, poop, on leash or not. What do we do about conflicts? Do dogs have can the dogs go into the common building? Is there what can dogs do, in terms of having a run? So those are some of the dimensions for that. So now in this case, we're sharing a car with 6 other families. What dimensions might you come up with? What needs would need to be addressed? What do you come up with? So I'll start with you again, David. And what would you say?
Let's say simple hygiene. That if you've got kids with snot all over the place in the back of the car, then it's a problem. But when I was thinking about this earlier, I was thinking about hoovering. Is there a hoover point where in the common house you can get a hoover out and hoover it before you put it back in the shared car parking space? Is that sort of thing. So I'm about the flotsam and jetsam, dust, sand from the beach or whatever that's in the car, but I'm already thinking one step ahead to how you solve it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So how clean? Okay. So this hygiene question, how clean question. What other questions come up? And how do we keep the outside clean? Car wash monthly. And what do we do about the animals? The animals only if, only in crates or in kind of bedding, some kind of protection for the car. So you get the idea of what I'm doing. I'm just taking each of these questions and coming up with a specific doing. And then we make this list of the doings, and then we can transfer that into the last box, come up with a synthesized proposal, maybe make it meet point 1, point 2, point 3. And now you've got a proposal that you can go through the consent decision-making process.
I go to Quaker meetings, so it was very funny to learn that it all came out of Quaker business method, which is to just reflect and wait until things emerge. And that organization's been going 350 years, and I think it's seen it right. And it helps, I think, to provide a little bit of structure, which is slightly different to the power over structure, which we're so accustomed to in our society. The imperative of listening to every voice is a powerful one. And I think we were able to trust each other more as we develop in the process. It's been an absolute delight, Jerry, and I'm sure on behalf of all of us, we thank you so much for your time this afternoon, for our afternoon rather, your morning. And I'm sure we'll continue to engage with Sociocracy for All. Thank you.
My pleasure to share this time with you. So carry on, let's go change the world.